All right, Paul, go ahead.
Hey, it's Paul Denniston, and you are listening to Superior Self.
Paul, my friend, healing through yoga. Thank you for
Hello,
taking the
thank
time.
you.
So let's talk about this, right? Like healing through yoga, grief. Um, there's so many definitions of grief. I talk about this, right? Like, so how did you find yoga? What did that look like for you?
Uh, the search for yoga initially began with wanting to find some sort of an exercise practice that would bring me more peace. That was how I started it. And then what happened for me was a lot of suppressed stuff that I had been running away from for decades all kind of caught up to me on that little space of a yoga mat. And I had a moment where I could decide, hey, I could run. I looked at the door and said I could just get out of here, which is kind of normally what I would tend to do with uncomfortable feelings. And I just was like, you know what? Let me sit. Let me breathe with this. And even as I was kind of like, my body was shaking, I was comparing myself to others, I was beating myself up. There was a sense of kindness that the teacher came in and approached me with that literally brought me to my knees. And what had originally started off a lot with just was anger and critical judgment beneath the surface was really about sadness. And I think the heart of what yoga is about compassion. And I really do believe having a sense of compassion for ourselves when we're struggling is really important.
Mm. So, Texas, right? You're from Texas?
I am. And it part of the work too is also a little bit about how much we suppress in our body. I
Mm.
think when we're struggling and in pain, I think that, the body remembers pain and trauma. And I think that because I grew up in Texas, not taught to deal with these challenging emotions, anger, jealousy, rage, sadness. And so a lot of the time is what gets suppressed. And so I'm a big believer that healing needs motion and movement. And that's
Mm.
a little bit about what this practice is about.
Sure. So, Texas, was it yoga, whenever you found it, popular back then? Was it like it is now? Was it?
No, 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 no. Yoga, it wasn't popular at all. And, gosh, my father being a Baptist minister,
Oh, what did that look like?
hey, you know, yoga you know, definitely thought of like, hey, this is going against religion.
Why though? Why is that stigma like that? Like, why? Why?
I think that some people are worried that you're praying to a false god, perhaps. And it literally the meaning of what yoga is about is yoga means union, connection. Mind, body, and spirit. And so I think that for some people with faith, that they feel like that this is going to go against their religion, and so. One of the ways that I do this work too is to say, whatever your faith and your belief is, you're welcome to bring it in. Like with my mother, I'm like, it's okay. You can pray to Jesus the entire time. And so
Mhm.
that was an in for her. It's like, oh, okay, I can recognize that then. So I think it's just people are afraid of it going against their faith.
Hmm. Did your dad ever get into it?
My father was yeah, not no, they're pleased with the work that I do, but it was never really they're not they're they're not into doing yoga. Um but they were teachers within me as I developed this practice, watching my father bottle up his anger until it would explode, and it would be frightening to witness. I would do the same thing for myself. I was bullied as a kid, and I would suppress the anger and let it boil until it would just explode. I would beat kids up, and I felt like anger was a dangerous emotion. For my mother, never attended her father's funeral, and so she held regret about that for a lot of her life. So my parents were definitely teachers for me about how to avoid challenging emotions. And so part of my work with going into this was to say, hey, I need to like learn how to be with this and move with this.
Hmm.
So I think you sometimes teach what you need to learn.
Sure. Teach what you need to learn. Buddha said something like that. Was it like, in order to walk the path, you must become the path, or something like that? Like,
Sure.
I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
like I just think, going back to the body, I think, yeah, definitely. Like I was, I'm a product of that, like a blue collar family, and not really talking about our emotions, or trauma and grief, loss of a loved one. It's kind of like you suck it up, like, don't cry. I was a football player, sports athlete, so it was, you show no signs of weakness, right? Don't let them see you cry. Never let them see you cry. And even as a male, right? Like look, in this incarnation, I'm a male, so I can only relate to this right now. But we are taught, as men, to not show our emotions, and maybe it will change. I'm trying to change it with my son now. He just lost a fish, right? And he started crying. Like, I mean, he literally never took care of this thing. Like, I mean, he could care less. But as soon as the fish died, he was shedding tears. And I want him to be okay in doing that. Like, because I think it shows him that it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to open up about your feelings and how you truly feel in any situation. It could be anything, and it's not. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be afraid to do that. Because like we were talking about, when you suppress it, it has to go somewhere. Like, it doesn't just disappear. Like that emotion is energy. Where does it typically go? It's in your body. I mean, you look at a lot of people's postures. Uh, uh, cancer, right? Like, a lot of people stress, and it usually goes to the body and stays there until you move it around or heal it, or however that looks for you. I just think it's so important, even as men, right? Like, to realize that there's more to life, right, than shutting the emotions out. And there's different modalities, like healing through yoga. And I love this book because it has, like, one, your story, which is fascinating, and then two, it has pictures and postures and guidelines on how we can heal through yoga.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like, well, I totally get it about how, men aren't supposed to cry, just go and do something about it. But I'm also a big believer now at this point is that, gosh, tears are evidence of love, and grief or sadness can really be a reflection of love.
Mm-hmm.
And if I choose to love in this lifetime, then grief and sadness it's a package deal. Um, and there's, one of the things that yoga has taught me is a sense of balance within the physical space. But there's also a space that, we can have an emotional balance too. There's a way that I can be sad, yet still resilient. I can be sad yet still find moments of laughter. I can feel anger yet still have purpose. Um, so one of the things that I was drawn to within this work too was pretty much creating a little bit of a GPS on how to move through struggle. And perhaps for someone it might be like, well, I don't feel grief, but I feel a lot of anxiety, I feel anger and stuff like that. So it's really identifying what's the struggle and what's the problem, or what's the trauma, and then how to learn to be with it, how to learn to move it in the body in a safe way, but then how to channel it through like fuel in empowering ways.
Well, that is it, right? Channeling that energy. And if you don't know, you don't know. Like, I mean, a lot of my curiosity with just spirituality, or consciousness, has led me to a lot of different work through yoga. There's different forms of yoga. There's, ways. I don't know. I've lost count. But which technique is like your sweet spot? What is your jam when it comes to yoga? Is there a typical? You know what I mean?
That's my jam.
Yeah.
You know what? I blend a lot of it together. I'm certified in Hatha yoga, which is focusing on holding postures. I do Vinyasa flow, which is also like flowing breath to movement. There's a yoga called Kundalini yoga that's using powerful breath and mantras. There's laughter yoga that uses laughter exercises to move things through. There's do a thing called yoga dance that focuses on chakras and how to move with that, restorative yoga on how to find ways to gently stretch. So basically, what I kind of did was I kind of took all of those things and blended them together in a bit of an experience that said, let's not deny the struggle and the problem, but let's learn how to move it through. It's not necessarily about holding postures, but more about using movement, breath, and sound to channel it in empowering ways so the heart can open.
Mm. You have a lot of images where you're touching your heart area.
A lot
What
of
is
energy.
well, like so, like there's a lot of pictures of you like holding your heart area, right?
Right.
What is it about that triggers that? Like I've seen some studies where, or not studies, but I've talked to some psychologists where they're doing early stages of try to do studies more so about like touching yourself on the heart area. Like you can just stare at somebody while you're touching your heart chakra or your heart, and you just start getting emotional.
Sure. It's because it's where love lives. It's where grief lives. It's where unresolved sadness lives. I think that that space within the chest is it's where the love resides, and so no wonder we can feel emotional within that space. I think that there's places where sometimes I'll place my hands on my core and my stomach, and some of that is a way to find centering. And sometimes it's a way to tap into the breath, but even recognizing right within the solar plexus, it's where we hold our power, it's where we can channel things through. But it's also a place where when things get stuck, as far as processing challenging emotions, it can also cause, eating disorders or eating too much or maybe anorexia. So the body holds on to and remembers many different things. And so yeah.
Mm. It's like you're moving it, right? Almost
You're
like,
moving the energy
yeah.
through, yeah.
No,
And I think that I even just like it gets stuck too. I mean, in a normal place where sometimes it can get stuck for people is right in the throat. Sometimes people have a hard time expressing what they want and what they need. Sometimes, it can live in their body as far as like the weight of the world lives on their shoulders, and their shoulders are coming up to their ears. I think that the struggle can live within the mind. I think that, we can catastrophize and when sometimes we've experienced a loss, or maybe we're focusing on the past and holding regret. We're looking at the future and worried about it. Sometimes it can create sleepless nights. And so the body is a powerful thing that a lot of the times when we're struggling, what's happening is we're stuck up in the head. So this is really a way to compassionately bring a sense of union and connection, mind-body connection, to help us to find more harmony.
sure. Did you have to go to India for 20 years and study in a cave, and then now you're this yoga master?
No, I didn't. I did not do that. But part of the work that did start off with this was going and doing a silent meditational retreat at it was called Vipassana, and it made me really, as I was starting to develop this work, just sitting with the discomfort of it all and learning how to breathe with it and be with it. But I was also starting yoga trainings at that time too. And I was also just a big believer of moving with it too. So, I think that I identify with yoga within the moving meditation aspect of it too. But I do think that it's important to be with the struggle, and also we got to find ways to move it out of our body too.
Have you ever experienced what they call like that Kundalini experience? Have you ever had that before?
Absolutely. That's
Really?
it. Yeah, I'm a Kundalini teacher. It's like a feeling of bliss. And it's because you're using prana, oxygen, life force energy in powerful ways. And so, yeah, it's pretty powerful. And look, I came from a place of addiction, definitely, as I was trying to run away from challenging emotions. Definitely used whether it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll to numb the pain. And sometimes people who are in recovery definitely find a sense of uh, they tend to be drawn to Kundalini yoga just because it gives them a sense of a natural high that sometimes is what they achieved within their addiction.
Mm. So it's like breath work and movement combined together, and then you get, I've heard like it's the energy that, like the life energy that moves up your spinal column and out the top of your head or something like
That's
that.
right. That's right. Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I want to. Is this in the book, like technique, like?
Yeah, it's adapted in a different way. We're doing something similar to that, and work is definitely inspired from Kundalini yoga. A lot of the work within Kundalini yoga is really moving through the chakras, and what this book is doing is similar to that, but it's incorporating movement, breath, and sound with a purpose. And like within the book, what it goes through is a five-step process, and the first one is about developing a sense of awareness of where you're holding struggle and pain in the mind and body, awareness of the breath, and awareness of ways to move the body and the spine.
Mm,
Then the second step that the book goes into and this work goes into is using expression. And expression is to take the struggle and the pain and to channel it through in empowering ways using movement, breath, and sound. I spent so many decades running away from it that I'm like, there's a way to channel it here in empowering ways. And then the third step is about connection. And connection are flowing meditations that allow us to, whether it be witness the struggle, but also flowing meditations that embody love, grace, and gratitude. And then the fourth step is about surrender, and these are postures to stretch, to calm the mind, to find a space of relaxation, to guide us towards more peace. And then the final step is evolution. And evolution is using techniques, using movement, breath, and sound to tap into perseverance, play, and purpose. It's to recognize I've experienced a loss, I've experienced a setback in life, and I'm different now because of it. So how do I move forward after this loss?
mm. What was it for you? I mean, you talked about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but like, what point? Like,
The
was it?
loss could be anything from losing loved ones. My sister, who I dedicated the book to, passed away from cancer, and this, I would sit with her on some dark nights in the hospital and seeing how much anger she was suppressing, and was taught that good girls aren't supposed to be angry, and so. Um, Learning and supporting her to help to move it through. Um, the loss for me could be relationships, areas in my life where I was betrayed and where I betrayed others. Losses in my life could be, having physical injuries within my body and learning to how to move and to adapt. Loss could be anything from, the dreams that I thought were going to happen in my life and not allowing, and things aren't happening. Didn't happen the way that I thought.
Well,
So
stop right there. So things that you
okay.
dreamt about and they didn't happen the way that you thought. Do you look back at them and regret that they never happened, or not regret, but do you wish that they had happened, or do you think that, because I think about this quite a bit, right? Like everything happens for a reason, and the universe happens for you. Like, do
Hmm.
you still feel? I mean, do you feel that
No,
way?
at this point, no, at this point now, um, because I kind of did the work, and I know, but when I was developing this and not letting some of that grief or anger or disappointment move through, I was definitely feeling stuck and bitter and disappointment and stuff. So I definitely felt it at the time, but learned that, whoa, if I start to channel it and move it through, it kind of opens a new pathway up for me. So that happens. Also, I just want to say too, another big loss that I think that is a collective loss that we're all experiences is that how things have changed within our life from COVID,
Hmm.
and how some people and when I mean dreams that will never be, some people are like, I was supposed to have a wedding that got canceled and had to shift and change. I thought that, my work has changed with it. I've lost loved ones. So I think we're experiencing collective loss even just within this pandemic in a personal way.
Sure. I mean, I mean, we're still feeling the effects, right? I mean, we're still, it's like an aftershock. I mean, with variants, and I don't think that'll ever end. But
Right.
like we lost, faith in, the entire. I mean, I'm not just saying, I'm not pointing just at the pandemic, but like recent years, we just lost a lot of faith in, almost humanity, like the media, obviously, right? Like, this fake news agenda and, politics and who to believe, like, a lot of misinformation. We like lost that connection with like, what are we doing here? Like, we're just spreading all this. I'm not gonna get into this rabbit hole, but um
And that loss can happen with, it doesn't have to mean that the person has died too. That loss can be, I've seen families get separated because of their different belief systems.
yes.
So that loss, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be death. I mean, sometimes losing people that we cared about and no longer can be with sometimes can be even harder because they're still alive, and that sense of separation and disconnection can be really hard.
At polarization, even with, the political
Sure.
agendas and things like that.
Hmm.
You did a lot of work in hospices, right?
Yeah. I did what's called heart touch massage, and what it is it's sitting with the dying, and to be able to place your hands on them, and it's a gentle type of massage, and it's where you recognize, it's almost like you're massaging their hands, and it's almost like a sense of thanking these hands for all of the people that they've touched, and to even like massage the feet, and even just to appreciate the feet, and to say how these feet have walked many, thousands of miles perhaps, and to just recognize and acknowledge the body as it slowly begins to shut down. And
Hmm.
so yeah, that was a big thing for me too, because I was a bit of an empath, and so I would take on other people's struggle and pain, and it would hit me personally. And so one of the things that I learned within that practice too was, is there a way? I think we could all have more empathy in this life, but I also don't want to be a sponge and take on people's pain, because I've got enough pain. I don't need to take on any more. But but is there a way that I can move in a space of where it moves from empathy to compassion, just so I can, sit with them and be with them without feeling like I have to, you know, I can put myself in their shoes, but I don't have to take their shoes with me. Um, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I do it all the time, right? Like, I mean, you have a conversation with someone and you're just checking on them, and it turns into a, them. And I do it too, right? Like you get on the phone with someone, you haven't talked to them in a while, and they start just, going over their day to day stress. And then you take that on and you carry that home with you. So I could definitely relate to that. But someone on their deathbed, I mean, you must have had some serious moments with people who, you know, clearing that grief, that trauma, the emotional hang up. Like I can't even imagine.
The disappointment, my body's not functioning the way that I did. I mean, I definitely, the regrets that people might feel and experience in those final stages, the anger at God. I remember being with my sister, and who was very att- her faith was so important to her, but she was also felt like God had abandoned her, and being able to say, you know what, we're going to use a couple of techniques here to move the pain out and through. That even if you can't physically do it, there's ways that you can use it, with your breath and your sound, even when you physically can't do it. So yeah,
Mm,
um, it does. Gosh, yeah, it can be very challenging to. I guess what the work this work has taught me how to be in the discomfort,
mm,
um, but to not lose my center as I as I am in the discomfort,
Sure.
within myself and with others.
Sure. Well, I mean, society, right? Like we don't necessarily look at death the same way that other cultures do here in the West. It's very formal. It's very, closed casket or open casket, but there's a process.
Right.
India, sometimes you have, there are cremations out in the street or something, they're carrying their dead, they put it in the river or whatever. Um, that first experience in the hospice must have, you talk about comfort, right? Like that had to be, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that was with your sister, which could be very emotional anyway, because you're just so connected. That's your sister and you're seeing that, right? Like, but to be able to be that brave, like Ram Dass did a lot of hospice work. And, it's something I want to do eventually. Experience that, just experience somebody when they're literally on their deathbed or transitioning over, you know, into another state of awareness, but being there in that vulnerable state and seeing that, and seeing them alive 1 minute and then pass, or not pass, I guess, like transition the next. And there's a different, like you can tell, like it's just, this just goes back to the idea of like we're more than our physical bodies. Like as I speak to you, like, even if you've been to a funeral before, like people listening, like you see the difference when they're alive and when they transition. Like there is a something about it is the energy is not there, the look, the life is not there. And it's like you get to be there in that moment where that transition takes place, and it's like you're sharing a moment with them. And the most vulnerable moment besides birth, the most vulnerable moment in someone's life is the moment of their death, and you're sharing that moment with them. Like that first experience, if it wasn't your sister, what was that like?
Since you spoke of Ram Dass, it reminds me of the quote that Ram Dass has about we're all just really walking each other
Mm.
home. And so in that space, I'm just kind of holding their hand as they transition. And I even think of Wayne Dyer talks about how we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so the body will fade, but, you know, I believe that the spirit lives on. And like take for instance here, I got my picture of my sister. I'm going to bring it out. Her name was Ella. And so Ella, her physical body is not here, but her spirit lives on in me. You know,
Mm.
the qualities of who she was live on in me. And so in that way, there's a part of her that still stays alive. Um, and so that's,
Well,
I
they're
guess,
never gone, dude. You know what I mean? Like
right.
they're never ever gone. I mean, uh, I've done experience with myself and consciousness where I've had like just using your imagination. Next time you're doing yoga or whatever meditation that you use, just try this for 10 times and just try it and collect data and information. Like you can have like I use my imagination with my grandfather or my grandparents who have passed, and I'll just start it with my imagination and I'll have a conversation, just start talking about things. And next thing you know, I'm receiving information that I don't know about, right? Like things that, oh, well, my grandfather, will tell me something that happened in his life. And like, I will, fact check that later, and it turns out that thing actually happened, but I didn't know that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just,
Sure.
Robert Monroe speaks of this. One of his students, Bruce Moen, Thomas Campbell talk about this, using our consciousness abilities or consciousness talents, like, psi, they call it psi phenomena, using that, but we're connecting with the greater, larger consciousness, which we're all connected to, and people don't want to believe it because it's like, oh, that's your imagination. Well, it's just your subjective experience. And if you can collect data, like if you're in a meditation and you speak to your sister and you just start having a conversation, like eventually, like 10 minutes go by, and now you realize that she's telling you or having a conversation with you that you're not, that you're not saying these things anymore. Like, and then, you do that 10 times and you start finding, ask a question like, something about this in her life experience, and you'll get information that, you might not have necessarily known. And then you go back and you fact check it and it's like, oh crap, like I didn't know that, but it did happen. um, we're connecting with the larger consciousness system when we're in meditation, and we
Sure.
receive some images, we receive guidance, and whether you want to, it could be them that we're connecting with or whatever source. However, people don't buy a lot of, they don't buy stock in that because they say it's very subjective, but yet every decision we make is always subjective. I mean, every decision that I made today is subjective in my opinion and in my experience. But because if everybody wants to be empirical and objective, they want to say, well, if I can't hold it and measure it, it doesn't count. I don't agree with that. But I'm sorry about going down rabbit holes. I just
Well,
think that
I'm also, you're talking about raising consciousness and lifting vibration. And so, coming back to even just what we were talking about within the chest and placing the hands on the heart, I really do believe that lifting our consciousness up is coming from a place of love. Just even for myself personally, my interpretation of what God would mean to me for lifting our consciousness up is literally love. And so for me, sometimes as I have moments where I will miss my sister or something like that, there can be a time where I place my hands on my heart, I say her name. There can be a time where I'm in a moving meditation where I say I'm sending you love, and whether she receives it or not, I'm not sure, but it gives the love the space to move, the space to go.
yeah.
And just as I recognize that love is very important, that's why grief's important too, because it is a package deal. And I'm also a believer that grief doesn't need a lot of time, but it does need some dedicated time. Because if we really want to, let's say, lift our vibration up, we also have to kind of like move through some of the lower vibrational things and release them out to lift the vibration up too.
No, absolutely. You gotta deal with that, right? I mean, like just with it, with happiness, you explore happiness, you promote happiness, you show happiness. You gotta do the same with sadness and anger and hurt and grief. You gotta feel it, right? Going back to
I'm a person that believes that happiness and sadness can be friends. I actually think that they can coexist and that they can live together. It's a fine line between laughter and tears.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think that going back to the subjectivism of it all, like nobody's standing behind you, Paul, and with a checkbox and saying, all right, well, that's not true because like, that doesn't meet the list here of criteria for this to be a real experience. It's like, who knows what's really real, right? Like what is real outside of your own perception of it? Like there's nobody, a scientist isn't standing behind me and saying, well, yeah, Trey is having a conversation with Paul right now. So that's real. No, it's like, it's how you feel about it. Like, how does it at the end of the day, how does it improve your life, your quality, the quality of your being? Like, who cares? You're sending your sister love, and who does it really matter if she gets it or not? Like, no, because it's you connecting with something higher than yourself, and it allows you to feel at a higher vibration. It allows your body to feel at a higher vibration. It allows
It
yourself
gives
to,
the love the space to go somewhere
yeah,
too.
you're sending out love. I mean, come on, like we need it more now than ever.
Right.
So I just feel like, little message here to everyone is, dive into your subjectivism, like don't worry about what everybody says, and it's your perception, it's your experience. Just be with it, and if it feels good, let it feel good. But yeah,
And to be authentic and real too.
no,
Look, I deal with anger. I deal with jealousy and rage. I deal with like, guilt. I mean, these are all part of the human experience. So I'm also a big believer in not bypassing pain too. I feel all of it, and I am not perfect here. I am. It's all about especially in my place of recovery, it's progress, not perfection.
mhm.
And so I strive to be in that place of maybe gratitude and love. And some days it's good, and some days it's not. And I'm a big believer in, hey, let's not bypass the struggle and the pain. There's a way that we can do something with it. We
Mhm.
can there's a way that we can use it in a power as a powerful fuel to that can be empowering. Yeah.
Sure. Empowering. Yeah. Well, something just came to me, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it's like your room. It's like your room growing up. Like if you don't clean up after yourself, shit gets cluttered and it makes you feel like crap, right? Like just like it just, you feel out of it when there's a lot of disorder and chaos. So you're like,
Right.
and relate that to your body, make that translation to that. Like there, when there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of, a lot of clothes on the floor and there's a lot of shit strung everywhere,
That's
like
right.
you feel out of place. You feel like there's just chaos in your life. So clean that room up. Go in there
Clean
and
that shit
tidy up.
up.
Clean it up, and then you'll feel better.
Yeah.
And it's not wrong to have, your clothes on the floor. It's just clean it up. Be in it, and allow yourself to get organized.
Right.
I mean, that's organization. I mean, lowering entropy. That's what it's about. It's not living in randomness. Get some order in your life. You feel better. I mean, go make a list. um so I mean, you talked a little bit about struggle and addiction and things like that, and we always, I mean, addiction is a part of the human condition. You never really beat it. I think you just kind of, you do things, you put things in your life to kind of help you along with that addiction. Like, we're very, I'm very addicted to sugar, right? Like I am. Oh my god, if there is Sour Patch Kids or Swedish Fish or Airheads, I'm in that, right?
I'll have some too.
I'm trying to get out of there because, like, I'm trying to, like, limit my alcohol. Like, I'm a social drinker, but I want to be clear headed and I want to go deeper in my meditations, and I'm eliminating sugar from my diet so that way I can, get more clear minded and go deeper. But I tell you what, man, and I'm not comparing this to anyone's addiction at all, but it's tough. Like, especially with three kids, like I see sugar around here quite a bit. And it's like, damn, if I don't want to go tear up some Fruity Pebbles or some Reese's peanut butter cups. Like, but it's putting, I don't know. I mean, it's taking the time out of your day to put in the necessary tools. Give yourself the tools, like yoga,
Right.
meditation, things that are going to help you promote that lifestyle, right? Like alcohol, like that's tough because um it could be genetic, it could be conditioned, it can be, it could be a lot of different things. It's a tough topic because there's not like a one size fits all answer to someone who struggles with alcohol or drugs, because you're chasing something. A lot of time it's you're covering something up with that, right? Like, you don't want to deal with it, so what do? You go use alcohol, or drugs, or let's say, I mean, I don't know. I mean, am I getting off the path here? Am I not is that not
No, I mean, I,
relatable?
I mean, what's coming to me for what I was drawn to was reality was too hard to be in, and so I was looking for a high, or I was looking for this feeling that I'm going through. I need to shift it, and so let me look for this outside substance that can change it. So. But what would happen for me too was then the thing that I was so drawn to, it turned on me, and it was like I there was a sense of dependency on it, but then it was a sense of like guilt and shame for going through it and experiencing it, and then the emotion perhaps that I was trying to run away from just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that was why I was doing it. It was a place to numb the
Hmm.
pain and a place to try to like uh, get a high. And then what I found is that it left me more disconnected.
Yeah, disconnected. I mean, I was doing the same thing. Like if I stopped for a minute and like really thought about things or life or my situation, like it was painful and I didn't want to feel that, or so,
Right?
you know what
Yeah.
I
Who
mean?
does?
I didn't want to feel that, so I'd go to a bar or whatever and hang out and be with the guys or something. And then, a lot of these relationships were superficial. They weren't deep. They were just kind of like, hey man, let's go drink. And then, a lot of the guys want to, who wants to drink alone, right? Like, misery loves company. But it's like, even now, right? Like, as a a father and a husband and, you know, searcher of consciousness and higher awareness of curiosity is just going all over the place. It's like, you know, alcohol, what does that do really? You know, is it worth it? Is it, I'm not saying I'm better than that. Yeah, there are days where I feel stressed out and I want to have a beer to mellow out. But then again, it's like, is that just a conditioned craving? Is it, you know, is it just over my life? Have I just conditioned myself to want to grab a beer because that's what the societal rule set is, you know? Like, so I think finding new things, like experiencing new ideas of therapy, of modalities, you know, grief yoga, um, meditation, exercise. I think when you start exploring different parts of yourself and you start really taking a deeper look, right? Like not just superficially looking at it and saying, well, you know, my girlfriend just broke up with me or whatever, or you know, I had a bad day at work, or I had a fight with a parent, or I'm just, you know, I'm in a rut. I'm going to go chug a beer or, you know, whatever, take a gummy. I think instead of doing that, you take, you know, kind of check yourself a little bit and say, all right, what is it that I'm covering up or I'm running from, and kind of take a deeper dive.
And is is the after effects, what's going on after that too, you know? What's the feeling like for you after it's, you know, maybe the next morning and stuff like that too. So I think that you know, you're talking about raising consciousness and awareness. I think the first step is like, am I numbing something? Am I avoiding something? And the awareness is also like, how do I feel after I've completed it or done it, whether, you know, the next morning and stuff. So that's something to just check in with yourself about
Mm.
that.
You kind of just add on to the depression, right? Like, I mean, who feels good after and being hungover? Like, I mean, trust me, I feel even worse. Like, you know, when I was getting after it, like just having a hangover. I mean, I have a beer or two now, and I run. That is my shedding of the ego. That is the, you know, that is a, I consider that yoga, running.
Sure.
Um, but if I have a beer or two, I feel it. You know, even if I have sugar, I feel it. You get a headache, you just feel like crap. Like
Right.
I'm all about trying to just the best version of myself I can put out there. And trust me, I'm not perfect. Like I am totally not perfect, and I have faults of my own. And you know, there are definitely areas. There are shadows. You know, Carl Jung would say, you know, shadow work, right? Like there's definitely some shadow work I still have to do on this self. But how, you know, you evolution, how do you grow? You go through it. You gotta really take a look at yourself. And I can't understand, you know, I can't state this enough. It's like really looking, shining a light on the darkness and just seeing what's there and not being ashamed of it. Really, just, you know, it's us, it's who we are,
Right.
and being brave enough to look at it.
Yeah, and for me, within my depression, when especially as I was kind of starting to do this work, was, you know, recognizing just how much I was, you know, using drugs to try to help to numb the pain. And I think for me, what was happening within the depression was because I wasn't allowing myself to really feel those emotions, feel the sadness, to feel the anger. It was all kind of like getting suppressed and pushed down more and more and more. And so then it was literally suppressing joy too. And so I do think, and as I work with people who have experienced depression, one of the things that I will guide them to is to release anger. I think that anger is a fire that if we move it through in powerful ways, it can shift things. And whatever that anger means to you, anger towards self, anger towards others, it can be a tool to begin to move through the depression.
Mm. Yeah, tools. I'm all about those.
And I also think that anger is sadness's bodyguard. So once the anger can start to move through, then the sadness can have sometimes a space to breathe. And sometimes people in their depression are like, I'm afraid to go into it because I feel like I'm never going to come out. But literally, it's moving through. Like, take for instance, there's this thing Like let's say with there's this thing with buffaloes that when they recognize that a storm is coming, they don't run away from it. They actually run through it to minimize their time in the storm. And so what we tend to do is we want to run away from it or hide away from it. So there's a possibility in moving through it, whether it be running through you, whether it be yoga for me. It's like I just spent so many years denying it that I found out that didn't work. So it was more about how do we channel it? How do we move it through?
Do you, I mean, that's my next question is like when you're doing yoga and you know there's something bothering you or you're going through some shit, like do you feel it moving through the body when you're doing the yoga?
Well, in this particular practice that I've done, it's all an expression. An expression is using techniques that are ways to channel it through. This ain't your mama's yoga class. These are techniques where where we take a pillow and we pound out the pillow. There are techniques what's called like the wood chopper, and you imagine you're holding an axe and you're literally chopping whatever the imaginary piece of wood is. There are technique like there's a technique that's called releasing the why, where people who, let's say, if someone who had lost a parent who had lost a child and has experienced like anger at God or something like that, it's the expression part can literally be bringing the hands up and just saying the words why to move it through. So expression, as you start to feel the stuff that's starting to come out, expression is about channeling it out.
I love that. Yeah, just like doing it, expressing that anger, expressing that depression, that sadness, even the happiness, whatever that looks like, expressing it. Oh, how do you protect yourself though? Like, I mean, when you're teaching, right? Like when you're teaching yoga and you're doing these modalities, is there something where, I mean, I know you're in it, right? Like you're in it with your clients or your students, but you have to feel, you have to take on some of that energy. How do you clear that? I mean, do you do just another session by yourself or what?
Um, I the first thing I do is that I there's three resources that I always tap into in case I feel like I'm disconnecting. I center myself with foundation, grounded, where I'm touching the earth, chair, feet, moving the feet, the toes, and stuff like that. That helps to root me in. Sometimes I'll bring my hands to my core and to just observe my breath as a place of centering. I'll observe my breath and really just kind of like I don't want to lose my sense of self because they need a guide here. And so it's important for me to like hold my space. And then just as a thing that I do is then afterwards, it could be anything from I change my clothes to just kind of like take off what was there. Sometimes, I'll go into a shower and just use like a shower meditation. I'll go for a walk outside. So that's the way I kind of like process it and move it through. Because I mean, I'm human. I definitely can. I take it on, but I've just gotten better at saying that's not my pain. That's their pain, and I can sit with their pain and I can be with it, but I don't have to take it on.
And being an empath, right? Already, right? Like that,
Right.
you feel a little, you're probably more sensitive than most.
I am, and again, I think that being an empath is a wonderful quality, and I think that we need them more. I just know from my own well-being that it doesn't serve me or them well being a sponge and taking on their pain. I think of it a little bit like I remember in the midst of my depression, I had a strong teacher who um, taught me this. Is it's like I think of it like I was in a ditch, and I didn't know how to get out of the ditch. Now, if they went down to the ditch and really just took on my pain, then we're both stuck. Now, there's a possibility that they can understand where I'm at, but then also offer a hand to help to pull me out. That would serve me better, and it would serve them better too because they're not getting stuck also. So it's a little bit of that place that helps me too. It's it's to recognize they're not broken. There's their soul is whole, but they're struggling. They're in grief. They're angry. They're challenged, and so being a place of like, how can I be a light in their darkness? Offer a hand, don't lose my sense of self, and find a way to help them to move through it, to move up, to move out of it. That's a bit of the kind of the what I try to do. That's the goal. That's the goal. And again, some days are better than others. So.
Absolutely. Have you through yoga, like I've been reading some research articles on meditation, yoga, and reaching states of bliss or states of non-duality, right? Have you experienced those states through yoga?
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. When moving the pain through, I also say we're not getting stuck in the pain, and so sometimes after the pain moves through, then I'll bring in like laughter exercises and connect to whatever it I'm feeling with, but using the laughter yoga, the laughter techniques to allow the endorphins to be released, and then to do going into connection where you're using flowing meditations to really open up the heart. Um, those are moments of bliss for me.
Hmm.
Those can be moments of like just deep connection, and deep flowing love. So um, yeah, that's meaningful to me.
Mm. You
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Yeah, I love it. I think endorphins, right? Like, I mean, I experience it all the time. Well, not every time, but during runs, right? Like, depending on the stress level and the amount of work I put into each run, the endorphins, like I'm addicted to it, and I think it carries over and transitions into my other facets of life. Um, just real quick, I was looking at your one sheet, and I don't know how I overlooked this, but
The what sheet?
the one sheet that Beth Grossman, who I love,
Oh
by
yeah,
the way,
yeah. Uh-huh. Okay.
she sent out. Teenagers processing feelings of grief and disappointment. Like, I don't know how important, like I should say, I don't. I think there's no other more important topic than helping teenagers get through this, these certain uncertain times that we're going through now. Just because my son's 11, is going to be 12, and soon be a teenager. Um, how are you helping teenagers process feelings of grief and disappointment?
Whew. Um, you know, a lot of the times by um, letting them uh, teenagers are hard because they don't want to look foolish and they don't want to look ridiculous, and sometimes doing some of this work going into it can be a little uncomfortable. And so one of the things that I do with them is to just go for it, and they'll see it and then they'll embody it and then they'll begin to do it and to release it and to move it through. And it can be a little hard because sometimes they're worried about what other people will think, but teenagers, you know, they they there's a sense of disconnection more now than I feel like before, just because we're all in our phones, we're comparing ourselves to others and stuff. So they're just so one of the things that I kind of do with teenagers is to really help them to um, you know, get the pain out, get the anger out, get the, you know, the discomfort out. That serves them the best.
Mm, yeah, I love that. I'm definitely, put that in my back pocket. I think, like, do you ever do thing like yoga practice outdoors, like in nature?
Sure,
Because I
sure.
think, like, one of the things that I have heard about, and I don't know where I heard this, so I can't take credit for any of this I'm getting ready to say, but I remember some I don't know if it was a study, and I hope this is not pseudo knowledge, but like, the more that we use technology, the less we are connected to nature. So, like, we lose that sense of self a lot more when we use technology. We just fall into that, that web of the web, Facebook and social media, and that societal type of this destructive type of just all that crap. But I think even just taking your kid out, really,
Totally.
and just going in nature and like reconnecting with that, because it's like, the more technology, the more that you dive into that virtual reality, the more you lose sense of self, lose the sense of connection to the earth, to Mother Nature, to us, to as a community. And like, yoga, I think I've that's one area, a modality that I'm not familiar with, right, just growing up. And I think it's super important to have your kids, even just introduce them at a young teenager level, and just have them experience that, and the non-judgment, right? Because you're totally right. Like, I remember being 13 and being like, I'm not doing that. Like, people were really, what do you think of me? Like, I'm not doing that. They're totally, watching what other people are doing, especially on social media. And I think, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing for people.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Well, what could be healing for them is really also just healing to me. So, I believe that we heal as a tribe, and perhaps, me helping a teenager move some of their anger out is helping, um, me remember how hard it was for me as a teenager and to do it, and can you sit and you be with the discomfort and just say, you know what, I'm still going to hold your hand and I'll be here, and if you need me, I might not know exactly what it is that you're experiencing and going through, but I just want you to know that I'm here and you're not alone.
Oh man, that's powerful. Because like, you think about it, you're not just helping the teenager, you're helping the parent, and then you're also helping that teenager for when they're parents too. You know what I mean? Have a different, a fresher look on how to connect with their kids.
Right, right.
So that's awesome. Paul, this has been amazing, my friend. Like, we dug deep on this one. How can
We
people?
went deep, didn't we, Trey? Ooh, we dived deep in there.
How do we find you? How do we connect with you?
Oh gosh, you can find me at griefyoga.com, and the book that I have, Healing Through Yoga, you can find that at healingthroughyoga.com. And for anybody who orders the book, if you go to healingthroughyoga.com, you can sign up for a free companion course that will support the book experience.
Paul, my friend, I can't thank you enough for joining the show. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you, Trey. It was easy talking with you. I enjoyed that.